Human immediately crouched down and took aim. The wolf still had no idea danger was closing in. He pulled the trigger without hesitation. The gunshot shattered the quiet forest. He quickly ran to where the wolf had stood. But the spot was empty. The wolf had run off another way. So he kept tracking it. Not long after, he found it lying still. He gently stroked the wolf's soft fur, hoping its spirit would return to nature. He then checked its sex and found it was a female wolf. That made him even happier. Hunting female wolves helps control the pack size. Carrying his trophy, he whistled as he walked back to his cabin. In the Lake Mountains of Washington State, many wild animals live in these forests. The area also attracts people who love mountain life. One of them is Jay Livingston. 3 years ago he moved here and became a hunting guide. Today he is tracking a lost moose. The herd is exhausted and moving slowly, which makes the hunt more difficult. Jay was born and raised in the city. He once ran track for Team USA. Later he learned many hunting skills and fell in love with this free life. He lifted his binoculars. After searching carefully he spotted a few stray moose moving slowly. The discovery lifted his spirits. Jay quickly moved after them. Snow slowed his movement, but the tracks were clear on the snow, helping him follow the right direction. After tracking for a while he found a dead moose that had been eaten. Likely killed by wolves or a mountain lion. Jay buried it lightly and offered a short prayer, then continued the hunt, but now he felt more cautious. Wolves in Washington were once near extinction. Their numbers only began recovering after 2008. Now they appear across the mountains. If wolves are hunting, the moose herd keeps moving, which makes things harder for Jay. Luckily today fortune was on his side. Soon he locked eyes with a moose. He froze and slowly raised his rifle. Just as the animal was about to leave, a bush suddenly blocked his view. Not wanting to spook it, he lowered the rifle and followed quietly. Snow began falling heavier, but he caught up again. He raised the rifle. One moose suddenly turned back. At that moment Jay fired. When he reached the spot, only a few hairs lay on the snow. The moose was gone. He followed the trail and kept tracking. Finally on a slope he found the moose down. He breathed heavily. Excitement rushed through him. He patted the moose gently before starting to field dress it. With a small knife he opened the belly. He placed the still warm heart in the snow to cool. The rest of the organs he left for nature. Then he began butchering the animal, packing the meat into separate bundles. The head was wrapped in the hide. Now the meat had to be moved to safety. By the time night fell, Jay had finished and started a fire. He roasted the moose heart for dinner. After a hard day, his stomach was growling. He grabbed the moose heart and tore into it raw. The taste was incredibly good, enough to fully draw him into the meal. The next morning, dawn came again. Jay woke up and could not help but sigh. Last night was long and bitter cold. After resting, he got busy again. Today he had to get the moose meat home safely. To make hauling easier, he decided to build a sled. He cut 2 small trees of similar length for runners, then found pine branches and cut a few logs for crossbars. After that he put it together. And this type of rope proved very useful. Jay was not born and raised in the mountains, but he knew hunting also had to keep up with the times. So he often used modern tools to get twice the result. Before long, the sled was finished. Then he loaded all the moose meat onto it and tied it down carefully. Then he leaned his hip into the sled, got it moving, and officially set out. The distance to the parked vehicle was about 5 miles. A real test of physical strength. The snow made the sled glide more easily, but it also brought plenty of trouble. His steps rose and fell unevenly. Deep snow made walking extremely hard. He panted hard, draining every bit of strength from his body. Step by step he moved forward. But even strength has its limit. He stopped and took deep breaths, adjusted his breathing, then started again. In that moment he was like a black ox, pulling the sled across the land. And one hardship after another kept crashing down on him. He had to use every ounce of strength. At last he pulled the sled all the way to the ridge. The next stretch was downhill. The momentum forced him to run after it. Luckily there was no accident, though it still wore him out. The good news was the off-road vehicle was right ahead, and that made Jay feel as if he had been saved. He loaded all the meat into the vehicle and headed back. Not long after he got home and carried the meat inside. Though very tired, the work was not over yet. He still had to preserve the meat, because it was the key to surviving the winter. Even as a hunting guide, Jay still respected every animal he killed and used every part of the meat. That was the highest honor for the prey. Salting meat is an old tradition. Salt can draw moisture out of the meat and prevent parasites from multiplying. Jay poured salt into the bottom of the barrel first, then added meat and sprinkled another layer of salt. He kept adding more meat and repeated the process. When the wooden barrel was nearly full, he boiled water, then poured in boiling brine until all the meat was covered. Next came the moose hide, which also used salt to draw out moisture. This was a way to preserve the fur. Last came the moose head. The skull had a certain artistic value. First he had to peel off the outer skin, separate the upper and lower jaw, then collect the brain matter, an important material for tanning hides. Then he put the moose head into a pot and boiled it until the meat fully came off. He added a little sodium carbonate, the key to whitening the skull. The process lasted several hours. Minute by minute time passed. Jay felt it was time to lift the skull out. He removed the bits of meat still left on it, then placed the fallen teeth on the table. He truly enjoyed this life. Every day was full of challenge and surprise. Not long after, he received a request from a ranch owner, asking him to eliminate wild animals active near the ranch. In recent years, with few natural predators, the wolf population has grown fast. It has become a serious threat to ranch safety. Jay's job was simple: kill a few female wolves. That would help drive off the pack and keep them from mating in time. Deep in the mountain forest stood an old cabin. That was Jay's destination. For the next stretch he would stay there until breeding season ended. Jay walked around the cabin once and felt good about the shelter. Just then he spotted a few clumps of fur under the floor. It looked like wolf fur. Not far away he could make out a carcass. Jay walked over. Up close he saw it was a deer. The snow around it was covered in wolf tracks. Looks like the deer had been killed by wolves. Maybe they were not hungry yet and planned to come back for it later. But Jay had no plan to give them that chance. He decided to use the deer carcass as wolf bait. He loaded it onto a sled and hauled it toward the ridge. As a seasoned hunter he knew very well where wolves usually traveled. Before long, he reached the spot. There was a small valley here, a place wolves liked to pass through. It also gave him a clear view. After checking the ground, he dragged the deer to the valley floor, picked a good spot, then cut open its belly so the blood scent could spread. That would draw in wolves nearby. But that took time. While waiting, Jay set a few traps nearby. Under Washington state law, wolf hunting can only use live traps. Tools that cause serious injury are not allowed. If he accidentally caught another protected animal, it could still be released unharmed. Once the trap was assembled, it was ready. Jay scattered dry grass over the ground to hide the wire mesh. Then gathered branches and logs. He covered the trap completely, making it look natural. A good trap also needs scent. He pulled out a snowshoe hair, rubbed blood on the ground so the smell would spread fast, then tossed the rabbit deep into the trap. Wolves are cunning and smart, so any detail that looked wrong could make them suspicious. Inside this bottle was a special scent mix. It contained fish oil, wolf urine, and skunk oil. Jay sprayed it at the entrance to hide human scent and also make it feel like other animals had passed through. But that still was not enough. To really draw in prey, he also needed a visual trigger. He tied a CD to a tree with fishing line. When sunlight hit it, it flashed. That could catch the eye of distant wolves. Once everything was done, he could leave. By late afternoon the wolves started moving, and Jay went into hunting mode. To avoid alerting the prey, he slowly moved to higher ground with natural cover. Looking to the right, the deer site still showed no movement. For a hunter, the most basic skill is patience. But method matters too. He pulled out a call, mimicking the cry of a dying animal. That mournful sound in the silent wilderness was especially chilling. But to a predator it was like sweet music. It pulled them in without delay. Sadly, after waiting for a while, no target showed up. Jay felt discouraged. Was today another empty-handed hunt? Just as he was about to give up, a dark shadow suddenly flashed by. Jay instantly raised his rifle. He looked hard and saw it was the wolf he wanted. He fired at once, and the shot hit home. Even so, Jay did not rush in. Not until it was fully dark did he end the ambush and run to the spot. On the snow lay a wolf in silence, already partly frozen. He dragged his trophy back to the small cabin. It really was a good start. In a flash, 2 weeks passed, winter arrived, and temperatures dropped below freezing. Food became scarce. The wolves kept harassing the ranches. So every day Jay carried out his mission. He made his usual patrol. First, he went to check the trap. He looked inside, but there was nothing. Even the bait was gone. Jay refused to accept it and searched around. Compared with foothold traps, this cage trap was much harder to make work. For 2 full weeks it had not caught even a single hair. After checking it, he found the brutal cold had frozen the trigger mechanism. After fixing it, he tested it again. This time the trap door shut normally. Jay smiled to himself. Now he needed fresh bait. When night fell, the predators started roaming for food. Jay had finished repairing the trap and decided to go on the offensive. He found a line of fresh tracks and followed them. To avoid spooking the prey, he moved very slowly, always watching and listening. Before long he spotted the target. Jay immediately crouched down and took aim. The wolf still had no idea danger was near. He pulled the trigger. The gunshot shattered the silence. Jay rushed to where the wolf had been standing. But the spot was empty. The wolf had run another way. So he kept after it. Not long after he found it dead. He stroked the wolf's soft fur, hoping its spirit could return to nature. He also checked its sex and found it was a female. That made him even happier. Because taking female wolves helps control the pack. With the trophy in hand, he whistled as he walked back to the cabin. The next day, with the weather clear, he started repairing the cabin. As soon as he arrived, he noticed deer hair under the floor. Clearly they had used this place as a nest. And where deer show up, wolves will follow. So to remove the danger early, he decided to seal up that area. First, he used a power drill to join 2 boards together, then fixed them to the cabin frame. After that, he added 2 more crosspieces the same way. Next came the center panels. The drill screamed, and the metal sheets were locked tight to the frame. Before long, the front side was finished. Next was the sidewall. More complicated because the metal had to be measured and cut to size. And only then installed it. Once everything was done, Jay was very pleased with the result. But the work still was not finished. He still had to deal with the wolf he shot yesterday. A wolf hide could sell for around $200. But this one was badly damaged. So the price would definitely drop. Still, that was enough for Jay. Because besides the good money from ranch owners, he truly loved this work. Compared to the noise of the city, Jay preferred life in the mountains. Because it gave him deep satisfaction. With the job done, he planned to head home the next day. Spring came, and everything came back to life. River levels rose, making it the best time for fishing. Every spring, Jay went to the lake to catch a few whitefish. Fish meat was an important food source, and the oil could also be pressed out, then used to make scent lure, which played a key role in setting traps. Whitefish are large freshwater fish that can weigh up to about 10 kilos. Jay's goal today was to catch a few of them. Before long he reached his usual fishing spot. His tackle box held all the gear he needed. Whitefish are predatory fish, so he used a small fish-shaped lure with a hook. Then he added a worm to the back hook. After just a few steps the bait was ready and he started fishing. Jay worked the rod up and down to make the bait look alive. The method worked fast. Before long a hungry fish hit the lure. Jay pulled hard, but the fish fought back fiercely. They battled for a while, and in the end Jay won. A freshwater cod slowly came up from the water. Looking at the catch in his hand, Jay smiled in victory, and that was only the beginning. Because the lake was calm today, now and then a few wild ducks swam by, as if signaling more luck ahead. After waiting a little longer another fish bit. The rod bent into a deep arc. Jay reeled steadily, inch by inch, bringing the fish to the boat. It was a walleye, the first target fish of the day. From that point on, luck stayed with him. A second one came soon after. Jay got more and more fired up. He kept pulling in walleyes. He was so happy he even kissed one of his catches. At this pace, the job would be done soon. Just then thunder rolled and a spring rain suddenly came down. Luckily, Jay had hit his goal and made it home in time. Without resting, he took advantage of the fresh fish to cook fish oil. He cut from the gills and split the fish open. Then sliced the meat along the spine for sashimi. The rest went into the pot. He kept the meat and put all the fish skin into the pot. Then added water to cover it and simmered it for hours. While waiting, he worked on 3 beavers he had caught earlier. Before this, he had not eaten them because they carried many parasites. So he used them as bait. Once chopped up and smeared on traps, they worked very well. As time passed, jar after jar of bait was finished. When he opened the pot, the rich smell showed the batch of fish oil had turned out well. Jay scooped up the liquid, strained out the solids, then separated the oil floating on top into another jar. In the end, he got pure fish oil with a clean golden color. Today's effort was worth it, and it gave him more confidence for future hunts. So tell me, is this the mountain life you have always dreamed of? When you need meat, you hunt in the woods, set traps, and bring game home. A wolf alone can sell for as much as $500. And in spare time, you live off canned goods. Every day is a battle of skill against a harsh land. This is the Salish Mountains of Montana. Hunter Paul moved here to live 6 years ago. The land he lives on now is rented, so he has to work hard to save enough money to buy it. From building rat bait for fishing to hosting visitors. Especially old hunter Tom, a veteran skilled in hunting and hide tanning. Today he brought along a marten trap to teach Paul. The two headed into the eastern woods to find a good spot. Tom hung the trap box on a leaning tree, set meat as bait, then prepared the key step. He burned a piece of deer hide so the smell would spread and draw in prey. Paul could not stop admiring it, because today truly opened his eyes. After saying goodbye to Tom, he threw himself back into work. Because trapping season had officially begun, Paul had to boil all his traps to remove human scent. His old pot was too small, so he built a new stove himself. He cut a door in the middle of an oil drum, cut another octagon-shaped hole in the back, then welded 2 drums together and added a chimney. A new boiler stove was born. The boiling mix was water and wood dye, which removed rust and odor. The fire grew, the water boiled, and Paul dropped in the traps. He had high hopes for this trapping season. Not long after, Paul used a sharp knife to skin a prairie dog he had been hired to remove to protect a farm. This animal has no fixed territory, moves constantly, and digs burrows everywhere, putting livestock at risk, so he took the job. To do it well, Paul asked his son Jans to help. The 20-year-old wore a rugged mustache. He moved to the countryside 3 years ago and quickly fell in love with the thrill of hunting life. Once ready, father and son set out. Prairie dogs are hard to catch, not because they are too smart, but because they move unpredictably. Along the way they found a few old abandoned dens, then kept going and found fresh burrows with clear claw marks. It was a great place for traps. So Paul dug a hole nearby. He lined it with sand to absorb moisture and stop freezing, covered the trap with paper, then scattered sand over it, and added a top layer of regular sand for perfect camouflage. The bait was made from rat meat, which made them feel confident. Before long they found another burrow with signs of collapse. Jans felt a little disappointed, but Paul smiled and said a prairie dog was surely inside, because they often block the entrance when they sleep. This time Jans handled a double-set trap with 2 baits to raise the odds. Paul went to get more bait when an accident happened and Jans carelessly got his hand caught in the trap. Luckily his thick glove kept his bones from breaking. After calming down, he kept working more carefully under Paul's guidance. He scattered sand and finished the set, and after that the father and son placed a total of 10 traps. Then went home to wait. Early the next morning, while it was still dim, they headed out through light snow. Winter had quietly arrived, and when they got there, the first traps still had nothing in them. At the next spot they finally saw a change. The trap had been sprung, so Paul used a shovel to widen the hole. Jans pulled the chain and dragged out a porcupine, lifting both their spirits. Then they moved on, and there was another surprise when they caught one more porcupine. Catching 2 in one day helped control their numbers, so they happily went to report it and collect the reward. Not long after, the main trapping season officially began. Before daylight, Paul was already up, carrying gear deep into the woods, because winter days are short. Once there, he still had to keep walking. The target was a deer about 2 years old, still tender and good to eat. Deer tracks all over the snow were a good sign. Below was a rich valley where whitetails often gather during the rut. Paul started hunting at 51 and has loved this life ever since. As he walked, he saw strange sign and bird feathers, showing how harsh nature can be. Then he found blood and drag marks, followed them through the pines, and found a deer carcass nearly eaten clean. The killer was a bobcat, which often jumps on the back and locks onto the neck, biting an artery with deadly efficiency. Fired up, Paul kept searching for game. He spotted a doe, so he used the fighting instinct of bucks in rut by rattling antlers. Sure enough, there was movement, and a buck appeared. He shifted position and made the shot. The deer ran a short distance, then dropped dead. Paul dragged the carcass into the open, gutted it, then went back for the sled and headed home happy. A good start to the season. More meat stored up for winter. After that, Paul started trapping small game. He went to check the beaver traps he had set earlier and planned to trap muskrats too. Near a neighbor's place was a pond being damaged by rodents, because a beaver family had built a lodge there, seriously affecting the local ecosystem. So they asked Paul for help. He gladly took the job because it meant both meat and fur. The traps had been set a week earlier and had already caught 3 beavers. But the cold had frozen the pond and hurt the results. So Paul checked the ice thickness, moved ahead carefully, and reached the first trap. It had caught a beaver, its fur glossy and fine. He widened the hole, pulled it out, then left it there while checking the next trap. The ice cracked loudly, making him even more careful. Then, to his surprise, the second trap held a mink hunting muskrats. Its thick fur was very valuable. After that, Paul kept working on his muskrat sets. While looking for a place in the dangerous reeds, he slipped and fell into an ice hole. It hurt badly, but he still pushed on. He spotted signs of a muskrat den under the snow, cut a hole and cleared the grass, fixed the trap to a wooden stake, and covered it again. Time passed, and he started checking the traps. At the first one he was lucky to catch a muskrat. Paul happily brought his catch home. He skinned it quickly to keep the fur in top shape. He handled the beaver the usual way, starting by separating it, cutting off the tail for a knife sheath, taking the glands for lure. And since beaver meat carried many parasites and was not safe to eat, he ground it up for bait and packed it into bags. Paul sold the bait and traveled around to make money. When a heavy snowstorm came in, he officially entered trapping season, with martens as one main target, along with mink. Even though fur prices were down this year, any catch was enough to cover gas money. Before leaving, he upgraded the snowmobile by welding on a frame and adding a plastic snow shield to keep snow and ice from piling up and wasting fuel. As he rode out through the beautiful white landscape, Paul stopped when he spotted a perfect trap location at a culvert. He set the trap, used meat and fish oil for bait, then kept moving. At age 46, Paul still had never caught a marten, a soft-furred animal prized by trappers that usually lives high in the mountains. So he headed toward a mountain about 7,000 feet high. The ground grew steeper and the snow deeper, until he reached a pine forest buried in snow with a mysterious feel. Remembering what old hunter Tom had taught him, he began to follow it. He chose a thin wooden pole so a bobcat could not climb it, leaned it against a tree, and fixed the box and trap at the opening. He placed muskrat meat inside, then burned beaver gland scent and fish oil so the smell would spread far to lure in martens. Then kept setting more traps around the area. It was hard work, but he loved it. When he saw a moose lying on the snow, he only greeted it, since hunting season was over. After that he set more traps for small weasels and left. The next day was colder, and Paul went to check the traps. The very first trap had caught a mink, frozen stiff, and he was thrilled. The next traps were empty, which left him a little disappointed. But he quickly adjusted his mood, and luck returned when he caught a short-tailed weasel. It was not worth as much as a marten, but it was still a result and a step forward for his skill. Paul believed that catching a marten was only a matter of time. In recent years, wolf numbers had risen sharply, throwing off the balance of nature while winter food stayed scarce. In winter, when food runs short, wolf packs often come down from the mountains and harass ranches. So Paul was invited to a ranch where wolf tracks had just appeared. The ranch owner was so afraid that he offered a high reward. $750 for every wolf killed, and another $500 if the hide could be sold. So Paul gladly accepted, but right then he found wolf tracks in the snow and counted 4 wolves in all. These tracks were already a few days old because the range of activity for wolves can reach as much as 250 square miles. And they keep moving. By their pattern, they would likely return in about a week. So Paul had enough time to prepare. He went to the camp at the foot of the mountain, an outpost for the ranch where workers stay in summer to watch the cattle. It was empty now, and he planned to live there for 2 weeks while rushing to set traps. First he searched for signs of wolf activity and found the half-eaten carcass of a deer. The sign clearly showed the main killers were wolves. By one estimate, a single wolf can eat up to 20 deer a year, while a deer usually has only one fawn each year. A female wolf can have 5 or 6 pups a year, so the breeding rate is badly uneven, and proper human control can help restore balance. Paul decided to set traps around the area. Because wolves have an extremely sharp sense of smell, he wore gloves to avoid leaving human scent. And because they are smart and crafty, he hid the wire between branches so it would tighten around the neck when a wolf passed through. The more it struggled, the tighter it got. After that he moved to the other side of the ranch near the woods, which was usually the main direction wolves attacked from. There were no cattle there right now, but if wolves settled in, they would be much harder to drive off when the cattle returned in spring. So Paul made a plan to build a ring of warning traps around the area. He dug a hole, copying the way predators bury food. He set a large trap at the opening, covered it with green paper and loose sand, mixing 2 kinds of dirt to make it look more natural. Then he used beaver gland scent and poured fox urine at the mouth of the hole to make it seem like a fox had caught a beaver there. Because wolves love stealing kills from other animals. Once the trap was set, he headed back to camp. He got ready to spend the night in the bitter cold with plenty of firewood. When darkness fell, the wolves became active. Paul copied a wolf howl almost perfectly, making the pack answer back. And the standoff officially began. 2 weeks passed. The 2 sides were almost even as traps kept getting wrecked and fresh snow kept falling, making Paul slowly lose his early excitement. Many traps were touched and avoided by wolves, leaving behind only a few hairs. Almost like mockery, in 2 full weeks he caught only 1 wolf, while his original goal had been 3. And since he had to leave tomorrow, he had no choice but to pull his traps. The next spots were all empty, until the 3rd trap brought a surprise. It had caught a coyote. Even though it was not as dangerous as a gray wolf, it was still bad for ranches because it often killed newborn calves. The catch lifted Paul's mood, and to keep the fur from being ruined, he carefully cleared off the ice and snow, then took it back to process. After that he kept checking the rest of the traps. He understood even more how cunning wolves were when trap after trap failed, leaving him with almost no hope. He just wanted to finish packing up fast. But one last surprise appeared when in the snare there was a huge wolf, far bigger than a coyote. Even as an opponent, Paul still respected it. In the end he got 3 animals, bringing in nearly $4,000, a result that benefited both him and the ranch owner. On the way back, a shed deer antler caught his eye like a thank you gift for taking out the gray wolves. A few days later, Paul started working on the catch. Because wolves are hard to take, but wolf hides sell well for about $500 each. One hide was set aside for a custom mount for a client, which required a more careful skinning job. Looking back on the season, Paul had also taken 16 coyotes worth about $1,200. He had 9 top-quality beaver pelts, 65 muskrat pelts, cheap but in large numbers, along with 6 mink pelts and a few other weasel pelts, all in strong demand. Added together, 3 months of income reached about $20,000. Enough for him to buy the land he had dreamed of. The next day, Paul took his son to the new land, explaining his building plans for after the thaw, and felt moved thinking that this result could be passed down to later generations. It opened a completely new chapter in his life. Hunter Johnny spent many days just to catch one wild wolf. This animal had very valuable fur, easy to sell for several $100s. But he did not hunt it to sell. He wanted to sew warm clothing for himself. Tired of the dull routine of city life, Johnny came to the Brooks Range, 109 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. It was wild country, free, yes, but after a long time it could still wear a man down. So he often went on long hikes, searching for unfamiliar places to explore, like a drifter moving through nature. Since getting a snowmobile, his range had expanded a lot. Places he once wanted to reach but could not were now possible. The frozen rivers here were like highways, but they hid countless dangers. Luckily, animal tracks in the snow showed the way. They helped Johnny find a safer route. He cut a stick to test the thickness of the ice. Only after making sure it was safe did he ride the snowmobile onto the river. Life out in the ice and snow is harsh, but the scenery is absolutely stunning. Johnny heads out on these trips with almost no food on him, because the snow is full of small animals that can be turned into trail food. He wound his way into an aspen grove and decided to find dinner there, because grouse and snowshoe hares often show up in places like this. If he could get one or two, the trip would already be worth it. Thanks to the snow, he quickly found fresh tracks. In winter, this bird has natural camouflage plumage, and if it stands still it is very hard to spot. Johnny watched for a long time but got nothing, so he had to move on. Just as he hurried off, he suddenly spotted the target in the woods. From the trail edge, he pulled out the shotgun and dropped it clean. A good dinner was his right away. At home he eats deer meat all the time. Today he wanted something different. He found a clearing nearby, dug a big snow pit, and built a fire inside it to cook the game. A lot of people only take the breast meat from grouse, but that is wasteful. Johnny plucked it, removed the inedible guts, then roasted the whole bird. The bird skin holds great fat, so none of it should be wasted. Food like this needs no seasoning. The natural flavor is already enough. If he travels even farther out, he brings full gear with him. The first job is setting up camp. His Inuit-style teepee has a simple design, easy to pitch, which is why Johnny likes it. He just sets a few poles into a cone, throws a tarp over them, and it is ready to use. The temperature here can drop as low as -50 degrees, so a good stove is absolutely necessary. After camp was set, Johnny went into the woods to look for a few small animals to make dinner for himself and his dogs. In these mountain forests there are ground squirrels and tree squirrels. They do not carry much meat, but the flavor is first-rate. The problem is, just like ptarmigan, they also have camouflage that is hard to pick out. That makes spotting prey a real test of a hunter's eyesight. While searching, Johnny found lots of caribou tracks on the ground. That was exactly the game he dreamed of taking. But as a professional hunter, he had to stick to his original plan and keep hunting small game. After searching carefully, he noticed in the woods lots of fruit scraps and plants that had been chewed up. That showed the squirrels he was after had to be nearby. Sure enough, not long after, squirrel calls gave away their position. Then Johnny pulled out the gun and landed another perfect shot. Squirrel meat is rich and tasty. Half a pound is worth half a pound of silver. But one squirrel carries too little meat, not enough for a full meal. So the hunt had to go on. He had not gone far before he quietly dropped a second squirrel. Then a third right after that. That much meat was enough for him and the dogs to eat well. So the day's hunt ended there. He cleaned them quickly and pan-fried them. The man ate the meat. The dogs gnawed the bones. Dinner was neatly taken care of. Life in the wild really is that simple. If you want something to eat, you hunt it yourself. That is true freedom and true living off the land. But everything has to stay within the law. And friends back home absolutely should not copy this. Hunting small game day to day is just for a change of taste. But to live out here for the long run, he still had to go after bigger animals. As time passed, his food supply dropped fast, forcing Johnny to keep hunting caribou. Late winter in Alaska is also caribou season. Johnny had been extremely busy lately. Almost every day he went out hunting ptarmigan, squirrels, and hares just to stay fed. That morning, while he and the dogs were out to relieve themselves, he suddenly spotted something on the nearby lake. More than 10 caribou had appeared. At this time of year, caribou are usually already far into migration, so finding them this close to camp felt like hitting the jackpot. The weather was warming up, which made the snow crust turn brittle underfoot and crackle when stepped on. To make the hunt work, he had to be very careful and stay completely quiet, otherwise this once-in-a-lifetime chance would be gone. With his rifle he moved toward the lakeshore. Johnny saw that the caribou herd was still lying on the snow. After all his years in the wild, this was the first time he had ever seen a sight like this. Then he checked his ammo and got ready for a big hunt. At that point, the distance between them was about 700 yards. Well beyond effective range, because the lake was wide open with no cover. The caribou had already noticed Johnny. They just did not see well enough to know exactly what he was. So after the whole herd stood up, they did not run right away and watched for a while. Once they decided things were safe, they all lay back down to rest again. It seemed that as long as Johnny stayed calm and did not make a sudden move, they would not spook easily. But in country this open, how could he get close? A hunter has his own tricks. He lifted the rifle over his head and slowly moved forward. From a distance, the rifle looked just like antlers, making the herd think he was one of them. So they stayed calm and did not run. Like that, Johnny closed about half the distance. Now if he wanted to get any closer, he had to be extra careful, because one small mistake would ruin everything. Just then, the female on the far right edge suddenly jumped to her feet, as if she sensed danger. Seeing that, the rest of the herd also stood up at once and got ready to leave. Johnny had no choice but to fire right there on the spot. 2 shots were fired and hit one caribou, but not in a vital place. The herd did not bolt right away and instead bunched together, making a follow-up shot too risky. So he had to track the herd and keep moving. He waited until the wounded one fell behind before finishing it. Sure enough, not long after, the shot caribou dropped to the back of the herd. Johnny immediately dropped flat to the ground, fired one more shot, and successfully brought down a caribou. With this much meat, he could fully get through the hard stretch. To make hauling it easier, he had to process the caribou right there on the spot. First he opened the belly and removed the guts, then carefully skinned it. By this time the weather had warmed up, so the animal was shedding badly, which was annoying, but he still had to keep working. In the end he cut away the lean meat piece by piece and packed it out. Few people know that when he was young Johnny had been a real troublemaker. He drifted through the city in a blur, with no goal and no steady job. He got tattoos and lived like a street punk. He rode trains all over, hopped freight cars, and slept under bridges in a dark, hopeless life. Then at age 25 he wound up in a shelter for the homeless. And that was where he finally woke up. He decided to chase the life he truly wanted. After that he left the city alone and headed into the Alaska wilderness. Starting a new life, you could say that shelter gave him a second chance. So whenever he got a good amount of meat, Johnny would always donate part of it to give back. He only gave away the best cuts, keeping the organs for himself. Even though deep down he rejected city life and did not want to live around people. That did not mean he lacked feeling or refused to help others. So how could he get all that meat back to town? There was only one way, by plane. Just then, a friend happened to be flying by and helped haul it out. Johnny packed up all the ribs, neck meat, and body cuts from the caribou and loaded them on the plane. The rising temperatures signaled that spring was coming, and Johnny would soon leave the Brooks Range and head to south-central Alaska to hunt a black bear. He planned to live through the full spring, summer, and fall there. At this moment, Hunter Johnny was tracking a black bear, because every spring he leaves the Brooks Range and goes to Taylor Bay in the south-central region to hunt. To survive in the Alaska wilderness, you have to live like a nomad. You move with the animals. A life completely dependent on the land is never easy. That is why a hunter has to keep hunting often just to keep enough food on hand. Putting up meat for winter in the fall and getting meat for summer in the spring had become his routine. One thing to note is that black bear season is very short. If he failed during that short window, the days after would be much harder. So Johnny had to go after a large animal to make the most of the chance. There were plenty of black bears in the area, but once he started hunting, he found they were very hard to spot. Bears that have just woken from hibernation are usually starving, so they first look for fresh green grass to rebuild their strength. That is why Johnny's first places to search were beaches with thick green grass, where it is easy to tell at a glance whether animals have been feeding. Bears have a habit. Once they find a place with plenty of food, they will come back. So it looked like this grassy spot was one he would need to visit a few more times and test his luck. After that, the hunter went back out on the water and kept searching. At the mouth of a small stream flowing into the sea, the target finally appeared. Now Johnny had to figure out how to circle in closer and slip ashore quietly, so he would not spook the bear and drive it into the brush. It should also be said that Johnny's hunting dog was trained extremely well. When told to stay quiet, it would not make a sound. Once ashore, the two crossed a small stream and went straight toward the target. By then both sides had seen each other, but the bear showed no sign of running. Johnny quickly found a rock to use as cover and got ready to shoot. But after watching for a long time he still did not fire. Because from the back, the ears, and the face he could tell it was a pregnant female bear. An ethical hunter usually will not take an animal like that. He lets it have cubs and help keep nature in balance. So the search for a black bear had to continue. Back at the creek bank, Johnny spotted part of a spine in the water. It looked like it could have been from a seal, or maybe a bear cub, because at this time of year, Black bears do more than eat grass. They will also eat any cub they come across. That is nature, beautiful and cruel, with no mercy. Anything weak has a hard time surviving here. And of course humans are no exception. If Johnny could not find food on his own, his only choice would be to run back to town scared. Just then, a light rain started falling. From past experience, Johnny knew that in weather like this it was hard to find black bears moving around outside. So he decided to head back to camp, rest, and wait for clear weather. Then keep hunting. But the drizzle lasted much longer than expected. Hunting time was already short. And now the strange weather made it worse. Trying to rush would only backfire. Heavy rain often comes with strong wind. So to keep his old boat from getting damaged he had to pull it up onto shore. Looks like tonight he would have to sleep through wind and rain. By the second day, the storm had cleared and the black bear hunt resumed. Today he did not need the boat because he had already spotted a target nearby. With rifle and dog he started the search. But the bear had already run high up toward the mountaintop. Without an ATV there was no way to catch up. He thought the day might be wasted again. But then Johnny turned and spotted another black bear. He went after it right away. As he moved he kept scanning the area. Then a third bear appeared on his left. But this was no time to get distracted. He had to stay locked on one target only. That was his best chance to succeed. After pushing through woods and streams, he finally got within range. But Johnny still did not fire because his heartbeat was too fast. He could not hold the rifle steady. He took deep breaths to calm himself. When his heartbeat settled, he lined up the shot. The moment was right, and he squeezed the trigger. And just like that, Johnny brought down a black bear. His food supply for spring and summer was finally taken care of. Next he had to open the bear up, remove the guts and the parts he would not eat, then carry the clean meat back to camp for canning. He spent 2 days processing a black bear weighing nearly 200 pounds. And that meat would be his food for the full spring and summer. By then, temperatures in southern Alaska had reached 15 degrees Celsius. Flies were everywhere, so he could no longer rely on the weather to preserve the meat. So Johnny came up with a plan to can the bear meat. The first thing he needed to deal with was the bear hide. One of the few truly valuable resources in the wild. This was something he could trade for money. So first he spread a layer of salt over the surface to disinfect it and pull out moisture. Then he let it dry slowly, waiting for the moisture inside to leave. Once that happened, spoilage in the middle would mostly stop. During that time, he had to hurry with the bear meat. Because the flies around camp were unbearable. Even covering the meat with bags could not stop them from laying eggs in it. Once the meat spoiled, all that work would be wasted. To keep the flies off for now, he built a fire right below the meat rack and went back to camp with some dry rotten wood. Then he cut up a metal drum to make a stove and lit it. Soon the whole area was filled with thick smoke. The good thing about rotten wood is that it does not make big flames. But it makes a lot of smoke. So the flies stay away. Johnny had no refrigerator, so if he wanted to keep the meat for a long time, there were only 2 ways. One was salting and smoking it into dried meat. The other was canning it. Of course salting worked too, but it was not as convenient to eat. If Johnny had the choice, he preferred canned meat because the flavor was something he really loved. Most importantly, canning can kill parasites. He sharpened the knife a little, then started cutting the meat. First was the shank meat from the bear's leg. The texture and flavor were incredibly good. First he had to trim away all the bone, then cut the meat into good-sized chunks. The grain of the meat looked almost perfect. Hard to fault in any way. Oh, it smelled really good. That is fresh meat. Back to another story. A bird suddenly got caught in a hunter's salmon net. He immediately pulled out a small knife and cut along the bird's body. At first it looked like the bird would become a meal, but that move was actually meant to save it. He even tore his valuable fishing net to free it. This was a remote wild place in south-central Alaska. Johnny was catching fresh salmon. In past years, he usually caught salmon in the streams where they swam upstream to spawn. But once this kind of fish enters fresh water, the quality of the meat starts dropping fast. So after fishing season opened, he prepared a gill net more than 60 meters long to catch the freshest silver salmon out in the saltwater. Fishing out on the open ocean is much harder than fishing in a small stream. If the net is not set in the path of the fish, there is a good chance of coming up empty. This fishing trip was mainly to get extra nutrition for his dog Joa. Because the dog had followed Johnny for years and now had a tumor in its belly. It was about to go into town for a major surgery. So before that Johnny wanted it to eat fresh salmon to build up strength. When he first ran into the diving bird, it was actually already the second day of fishing. Johnny checked the whole net and found nothing but seaweed. Not a single fish. Meanwhile Joa was suffering from illness. So Johnny could not stay out too long. After making sure there were no fish in the net, he had to hurry home and stay by his dog's side. Then after a while he would come back and check again. It kept going like that. And he did not even know if it would cover the gas money. But effort paid off. After many trips back and forth, He finally caught fish, because he checked the net often. The fish were still alive. They were sockeye salmon, and during silver salmon season catching a few of them once in a while was normal. Salmon travel in schools, so once one gets into the net there is usually more than one. After checking the full net, more than 60 meters long, he ended up with 3 salmon. Not a huge haul, but still a very good start. As long as he caught the timing right. Later on he would have more salmon than he could eat. The fish caught that day were gutted, cleaned, and brought back to camp. While the dog was being treated and recovering, Johnny set foot on Kodiak Island for the first time to look for a deer. This place is home to the largest brown bears in the world. And there are a lot of them. Without his dog acting as backup, he had to be extremely careful with every move. Otherwise, the hunter could easily become the prey. After searching for a while, he found tracks and droppings on the ground left by deer. If he followed those signs, there was a good chance he could take one down. But unexpectedly, before he even saw a deer, he ran into a brown bear first. Luckily, this one was still small and not too worrying. After waiting for it to move off, Johnny kept searching through the brush and grass around the area. Deer were there, but the vegetation was too thick, making the search extremely hard. Using a call that sounds like a fawn can draw them in. But it can also attract bears, so that might not be such a good idea. He searched around for a long time and finally spotted a doe in the distance. This was not breeding season, so Johnny decided to take the shot. To stay safe, he had to get close enough before firing, so he could be sure to drop it with one shot. Because in a place like this, any extra noise could bring danger right back on him. But just as he got close, the deer vanished without a trace. He had planned to head back to camp and rest until the next day. But then he ran into another bear near the tent. If one of them wandered into camp at night, he could easily lose his life. So he pulled out the 6-shot revolver he carried and fired 2 rounds to scare it off with the blast. In the blink of an eye, Johnny's deer hunt had dragged on for 5 full days with nothing to show. Until today, he finally spotted another doe, and this one happened to be within range. He quickly found a good shooting spot on the hillside, lined up the target, and fired at the right moment. He successfully dropped the deer. The game he had been waiting for was finally in hand. And for now he no longer had to worry about starving. Once the black bear meat was gone, this deer meat would carry him forward perfectly. Because the deer here are not very large, there is not much meat on them, so he would need to take one more deer to make it to caribou season in late fall. This was the fat membrane from inside the deer's belly. Wrap a little deer meat in it, put it in a pan, and cook it through for an incredibly good meal. Life in the Alaska wild really is full of free meat, but fresh fruit and vegetables are incredibly valuable. If you had a pound of deer meat and could trade it for a pound of apples, would you do it? This time Johnny came to Kodiak Island, where brown bears live thick, mainly to hunt deer, but one normal small deer does not carry much meat and does not last long. Since he had worked so hard to get here and still had rounds left, he wanted to take one more, so when he headed back north at the end of fall, he might still have a little food left over. The surgery to remove the dog's tumor a few days earlier had gone very well, but nearly half a lung had to be removed, so the recovery would take a long time. That was why he had time to come here alone and hunt. In a life cut off from the power grid, food is the base of everything. The more meat you have on hand, the easier life becomes. Hunting may look relaxed and fun, but in truth it is exhausting. Just climbing these mountains is enough to make most people give up. But hard work does pay off. When Johnny reached the top of one ridge, he successfully spotted game. At that moment, the distance between them was only about 100 meters, and there were 2 animals. But just as he got ready and was about to fire, he realized the targets had somehow vanished. In the end, it was probably because Johnny was standing upwind, so they had smelled him long before. A great chance slipped away just like that. But that was fine. This was only the beginning. There would still be more chances ahead. He kept climbing higher and found some fresh droppings from the game. That showed the target was likely close by. Everyone knows hunting is really a game of hide and seek. The weaker animal hides, while the stronger predator moves around searching. And the hunter, near the top of the food chain, has to both search and avoid danger. On a small hill, a whole flock of grouse suddenly appeared. If they got spooked, they would burst into flight and make a lot of noise, which could scare off every animal nearby. To avoid that, Johnny circled behind the flock to push them off in the opposite direction. When he climbed to the ridge top, he realized he might have gone the wrong way. A big bank of low rain clouds and fog was rolling in, cutting down visibility and making it impossible to see farther. A lot of people would probably think the day was lost, but chances come in random ways. Just as Johnny was getting ready to leave, he suddenly spotted, about 200 yards below, a buck. At that moment, clouds rolled in with a light rain. That helped thin out human scent and also made noise that covered the animal's hearing, giving the hunter a golden chance. But because visibility was poor, He had to get his gear ready and move to a position closer to the deer. In a moment like this, there was almost no room for error. When he reached the spot he wanted, he immediately took aim and waited. Johnny did not hesitate and pulled the trigger. The first shot missed, so he quickly fired a second shot, and this time he dropped the target. As he carefully walked up, he found it was a black-tailed deer, the first black-tailed deer he had ever taken. The bullet had hit the neck, so there was no need to worry about busted guts spoiling the meat. This season's venison was in very good shape. The hide could even be used to make a new set of clothes. Deer blood is nutritious, but sadly most Westerners do not understand that, so they just let it run into the ground. Other than the heart, the rest of the organs were left on the spot, and in the end became an appetizer for the bears. The lean meat of a black-tailed deer is some of the best meat you can eat in Alaska. So not even a little of it could be wasted. The ribs and spine were not very good, so he left them behind. Seeing this somehow made the pack of noodles in my hand seem a lot less tempting. Actually, Johnny did that to cut down the weight he had to carry. Because from there back to camp he still had a long mountain hike ahead.
Thank you so much for watching until the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our next exciting survival videos. Finally, share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next adventure.